Wilderness. Once we had to worry about protecting ourselves from the wilderness. Nowadays, the wilderness itself needs protecting. Just like the eagle, Tirol's coat of arms. A region's quality of life used to be measured on how far away it was from the wilderness. Nowadays, a region's value increases if it still has unspoiled nature within its borders. The largest area of unspoiled nature in Europe is in the Alps. And in the heart of these Alps is the Tyrol. The life-giving streams of clear, pure water link the glaciers with the valleys, from which the people return to the mountains and nature to find new energy. The wilderness has become the basis of a national economy. Its most important industries, besides agriculture and tourism, are the wood processing industry and the energy business with its hydroelectric power stations. The Tyrol is the third largest Austrian federal state. 1/3 of it is barren mountain country, and another third forest. There is very little room in these natural surroundings for permanent settlement. Only the dairy farmers come up with their herds to one of the over 2,700 Tyrolean pastures in the summer. In this rough natural area, farm work has retained its archaic form. The countryside has forced the people to retain the old crafts, which otherwise might long since have been forgotten. This means the Tyrol is also a region where in the middle of today, a bit of yesterday has been preserved, because without it, survival would not be possible. A centuries-old farming culture may have established the region's reputation as a refuge for the last proudly indigenous people of Europe. Nevertheless, 20th century development has not failed to leave its mark here as well. Only 4.1% of the total population of 670,000 are involved in agriculture. The service industry is the largest segment, along with tourism, which has prevented migration from the valleys while focusing its attention on guests in search of relaxation in the mountains. Here, behind idyllic rural surroundings and the facades of old farmhouses, the modern world may be hiding. 1/3 of the workforce is employed in industry, which is why this sector is at least as significant as tourism. But only 12% of this region is suitable for long-term settlement. In this sparse area, the urbanity of European capitals dominates the lifestyle in the old cities. The Alpine Republic of Austria is located right in the heart of Europe. The Tyrol is one of the 9 federal states. It shares borders with Italy, Switzerland, Germany, and the other federal states of Salzburg, Carinthia, and Vorarlberg. Innsbruck, with its population of 120,000, is the state capital. The entire state is divided up into a few wide valleys where industrial life pulsates, and a few side valleys largely devoted to tourism. The regions are Innsbruck and Innsbruckland, the Oberland or highlands with its district capitals of Imst and Landeck, The Außerfern in the north, with Reutte, and Lechauen voted an area of outstanding natural beauty in 2000. The Unterland, or lowlands, with its district capitals of Schwaz, Kufstein and Kitzbühel, and East Tyrol with its center Lienz and the Tyrolean section of the Hohe Tauern National Park. When there's snow up in the mountains, it's still autumn in the valleys. The Tyrol has distinctive seasons which overlap because of its different altitudes. A warm southerly wind called the Föhn extends the autumn and keeps winter at bay for a few extra weeks. Then the first snow falls. In some places up to 7 meters of snow may fall, largely in the mountains, where the great winter sports centers have come into existence. The snow covers all the land and makes everything silent. It's as if the countryside and the houses were frozen in place and seemed to be waiting. Waiting for those liberating days when things finally start to bloom again and a cheerful green transforms the Alps into a glorious garden. The heavenly summer is limited in time, which makes it very precious. The Tyrol has always been an important transit area. The Brenner Pass, with its low altitude and solid infrastructure, is the most important alpine gateway. Anyone wanting to travel from north to south or vice versa had to pass through the Tyrol. One of the first and best known individuals who crossed the Alps was Ötzi, the 5,000-year-old ice mummy. The significance of this area as transit country is written all over the countryside. First it was Hannibal, and then the Romans who secured the route across the Alps, and later covered the whole region with a network of roads and settlements. The most outstanding example of this is Aguntum in the East Tyrol. Here, excavations have uncovered an entire Roman town. The Tyrol was very important for the clerical and temporal rulers in the Middle Ages because of its geographical location. They tried to secure the routes and lure the people over to their side by offering them privileges. This is how an early principality emerged at the crossroads of the trade routes, which was given nationwide importance by Meinhard II, the founder father of the Tyrol, and was ceded to the Habsburgs by Margarete Maultasch. This is why the Tyrol has belonged to Austria for more than 600 years and lies not only on the north-south axis, but also through the extension of the Arlberg route on the east-west axis between the imperial residence of Vienna and France. The south, with all its culture, was a magical destination for many artists. This brought Dutchman Peter Bruegel through the Tyrol, where he immortalized the Inn Valley with its Martin's Wall in his world landscape. For Albrecht Dürer, too, the Tyrol was a gateway to the south. He painted famous views of Innsbruck. Many others came as well: Goethe, Klopstock, Mozart, Heine. All of them, the famous and the not so famous, left their lifestyles, their culture, and their ideas in the country inns on the side of the road. What kind of people were these who stood at the roadside, watching as the travelers moved through their land and occasionally remained? They had to be inventive and skillful to survive, as they still are to this day. They know how to live in harmony with both native culture and high technology, and are used to dealing with people from other countries. Whether their companies are Kundl Biochemistry, the Planze plant, or Koch Digital Disc, the latest state-of-the-art, cannot shake their clear allegiance to tradition. Swarovski crystal also comes from the Tirol, as does the world-famous elegant Riedel glassware. Here too, the Rottenberg glass cutters maintain their traditional craft in its original form. In this sense, laptop and leather trousers are no contradiction for the Tyroleans. Scenes of life in the old days merge time and again with scenes of today. The high culture of the powerful people who once ruled and traveled through the region still characterizes today's lifestyles. And so it isn't unusual to find a farmer's cow being milked in a building modeled on an Italian Renaissance hunting lodge. Another farming family may opt for modern architecture, with its farm reflecting today's urbanity. Poor people are pious because hope is important to them, and they are loyal because they want someone to pin their hopes on. The Tyroleans too are pious and loyal. To this day, their lives are bound up in the fabric of the traditional seasons, whether in late autumn, dedicated largely to memorializing the departed, or the Christmas season, with its ancient customs and rituals that help the people get through the dark winter and fascinate the children. They are the ones to whom the traditions and skills of an ancient artistic tradition will be passed on from one generation to the next. The Alpine Christmas has helped establish the holiday customs of the whole world. The Christmas markets, like the one here in Haus, have also become widely famous attractions elsewhere. Yet all this religiosity couldn't stop the headstrong farmers from turning everything upside down at carnival time, known here as Fasching. Whether in Imst, Telfs, Nassereit or Tower, almost every village has its own very special way of celebrating these wacky weeks every year. This leads directly to the inexorable Lenten period, and then Palm Sunday, when the young village lads have to prove their strength. Then comes Easter, the feast of the resurrection, with all its lavish theatrical settings and customs, inspired by the architecture, the theater, and the customs of the Baroque royal courts. The early summer of the Feast of Corpus Christi is the time to pray for a good harvest. The function of all these holidays is to establish harmony between the people, their needs, surrounding nature, and the social and religious order. The whole area, especially since the Counter-Reformation, has been full of symbols of everyday religiosity. They mark the architecture and the landscape with signs of a Catholicism that appeals to the senses. The art of the simple people and the art of the powerful forms a single unit. Life within it manifests itself like a colorful play in a Baroque world theater. There's always some element of surprise behind the facades of the old farmhouses with their lavish Lüftelmalerei or decorative frescoes, because the Renaissance ushered in an upswing of science, technology, and industry. Many major manufacturers like the Grasmeyer Bell Foundry in Innsbruck remind us of this to this day. Churches and secular buildings of the Baroque period, that gigantic advertising campaign against Protestantism, provided the forms in which everything from architecture to fashion was oriented. The illustrations on the ceiling frescoes reflect and influence daily life. Art and life joined together in splendor, but also stressed the restrictions of a pleasant nation governed by divine power. This lifestyle, with its fixed images and rules, was not to everyone's liking. They emigrated and became famous. Or they remained and became local heroes. Or they conjured up grandiose ideas to serve as contrast to the limited vision of their homeland. Or they invented machines on which other people made fortunes. It was the very narrowness of the valleys and the close-knit relationships here that brought forth world travelers as a kind of counterpoint. Farm life has always served as a model for painters and poets whose humble figures were elevated to become internationally renowned. Many despaired of the tyranny of the ideal. In protest against the unchangeable order of a conservative, patriarchal society, they became innovators. That is why, to the present day, the content of many artworks has been determined by the dispute between enlightenment, modernity, progress, and the attitudes of a bucolic region where the preservation of things as they are is the most important priority. Meanwhile, the intellectual climate has slowly become more modern. Many scholars and intellectuals have transformed the region from within. Nowadays, a deep-rooted Tyrolean need no longer emigrate to make something of himself. The Tyrol's image still suffers from the preconceptions of the past and provincial attitudes. It is still regarded as Austria's little chapel. At the same time, the region's charm can be found today in the often ironic link between old and new, between the rebellious and the conventional, and the knack of consciously playing with cliches. The Tyrol has long since become postmodern in the best sense of the word. The native population, visitors from all over the world, and foreign workers form a liberal society. Until this came about, there were many long years of deprivation. The determining factor was the hope that the people in power at any given time might help relieve the problems of the common people. The first of these longed-for saviors was Emperor Maximilian, the last noble knight, who, together with the Fugger family, who owned the world's largest mining area at the time, made the Tyrol the center of the Holy Roman Empire around 1500 AD. Coin mining and salt mining in Haus and the silver mines in Schwarz transformed the small region in the Alps into an industrial zone at the dawn of the modern era. The dreadful social conditions the miners had to live in inspired Michael Geismeier to conceive one of the first European utopias, the Tyrolean land order. Its social ideas were centuries ahead of their time, but the harsh reality was that it changed nothing. Some of the splendor of the Maximilian era rubbed off on Ferdinand II. He converted Ambras Castle just outside of Innsbruck into a Renaissance residence with art galleries, making him one of the greatest art collectors among the Habsburgs. The people continued to sing pretty little ditties and obediently paid their taxes. In return, Empress Maria Theresia granted Innsbruck two new emblems. The first was the triumphal arch on Maria Theresienstrasse, and the second a new royal palace. Its splendors could no longer disguise the fact that the Tyrol had long since returned to the shadows of history. This all changed, however, with Andreas Hofer in 1809. He was able to give the Tyroleans a new gleam of hope. Napoleon, the Enlightenment, and the Bavarians were banished from the region. The common people in the Alps achieved a heroic status, even though they lost it all later in distant Vienna. This first successful and then tragic rebellion of a small nation with the death of its hero became the stuff that books, operas, plays, and films are made of. And when Napoleon was forced to yield to the old powers under Franz I, the stifling tranquility of the Habsburg Empire returned. The Tyroleans became loyal once again. For all this loyalty, they suffered enormous losses in 2 world wars, not only in terms of human tragedy, but also on the political level, the South Tyrol, which was severed from Austria in 1918. The hope that Adolf Hitler might reunite the region also proved fatal. It all came to an end in the Second World War and left behind a ravaged nation. But a strong nation of mountain people was able to pull through, thanks to the Marshall Plan, the Austrian State Treaty, and the rediscovery of the Alps after their liberation from dictatorship. After so many disasters, the purity of nature was once again in demand, and the Tyroleans seized the hour. They turned their region into a tourist attraction, which in its unmistakable combination of archaic wilderness and unspoiled nature became the most popular travel destination in the Alps. This success was founded on one of the world's first laws governing tourism, as well as the Tyrolean evenings with their national singers, which as early as the 19th century had made the lifestyle here internationally famous. The first large vacation areas with technologically venturesome mountain cableways all the way to the highest peaks had already been created back in the monarchy. Ski teachers and mountain guides came to develop into a new kind of masculinity. High life and après-ski created an atmosphere once considered the elegant privilege of the well-to-do, which eventually paved the way to today's fun and event society. An indispensable element in this history of tourism are the Beautification Associations, the Conservative Alpine Society, and the Socialist Friends of Nature. Without the paths and huts they designed and built, the Alps would have remained a wilderness and never become a recreation area. Mountain villages previously isolated from the rest of the world have now become international fun parks. Innsbruck became a small metropolis with international air traffic connections. And where there was once only open countryside and farmhouses as far as the eye could see, a tourist industry with every imaginable comfort evolved and now welcomes some 8 million guests to over 40 million overnight stays a year. That's more than a third of Austria's total tourism. The incredible success of today's highly professionalized industry is based on the collective efforts of an entire nation in support of tourism. Today's deluxe facilities hark back to a time when anyone with a spare room would simply rent it out to guests. It was mostly the women who used this to earn a second income for their families. The words of a typical song often heard back then say it all. The Tyroleans are a merry folk, the Tyroleans love to play, they rent out all their beds, and they sleep in the hay. There aren't many signs of those early days anymore. The mountains have been developed all the way up to the summits in specially selected areas. Ski lifts have been installed, the slopes are prepared daily in the winter, and the streets are cleared of snow. To avoid the risks of avalanches, snow is blasted from the dangerous spots, and avalanche barriers set up over whole mountain slopes to secure greater safety for the local population and their guests. The Mountain Rescue Squad assures personal safety. Its members are trained to use the latest life-saving equipment should an emergency strike, because the mountain has remained a myth which tempts people to go to their limits and beyond. This hasn't changed since the days of Louis Trenker, the great mountain filmmaker. In the same spirit with which Arnold Fanck shot the first ski films between the world wars, each generation of artists has dealt with the fascination of winter sports in its own way. Resourceful individuals like Hannes Schneider from the Arlberg region developed the first ski schools and skiing styles based on methods Norwegian farmers used to get around in the winter. These have been copied and modernized over the years. The desire to tear faster and faster down a slope with more or fewer curves established a new lifestyle, gave birth to new heroes like Tony Seiler, and laid the foundations for whole new industries. For the first time since the reign of Emperor Maximilian, the Tyrol and Innsbruck became the hub of the world, at least during the few weeks when the Winter Olympics took place here, both in 1964 and 1976. Skiing became a popular sport for old and young alike, and the once perilous mountain slopes were turned into new athletic venues where mountain acrobats could try out their skills. In the spirit of the times, the invention of snowboards lured the younger generations to the mountains, and a new form of professional athletic acrobats was established. International events such as Air and Style in Seefeld or the World Cup races in Solden and Kitzbühel have solidified the Tyrol's competitive edge on the winter attraction marketplace. And when the Skiing World Championship took place in St. Anton in 2001, initiated by the ski legend Karl Schranz, the world of winter sports turned its eyes to the birthplace of skiing. They came from all parts of the world to party on into the wee small hours. Tourism must remain compatible with society as a whole, which can be difficult when it is so successful. This unavoidably leads to discussions over how much the region is able to withstand. It is this ever-new quest for the right proportions that has kept the Tyrol up to the latest standards, because the object of the exercise was to preserve the soul of the region, while still being able to offer the guest enough to satisfy his yearnings for modern pleasures. In the blend of civilization and wilderness, everyone can find a vacation to suit all of his or her needs. New tourist information systems make the choice just that little bit easier. For all of this, a region can only successfully offer its guests what its own population enjoys, and the Tyroleans clearly do this with great success. Studies on the quality of life have proven this time and again. This is why the Tyrol recently took first place in a comparison of 243 European regions assessing life environments. With its perfectly balanced infrastructure, security, an intact environment, and an expansive cultural life, the Tyrol was rated downright unbeatable. But sports and culture aren't the only attractions here. They are nestled in a lifestyle of unprecedented hospitality, for which the 1,151 guest houses and pleasant cities form the basis, with such outstanding cultural monuments as Emperor Maximilian's tomb in Innsbruck. Besides the enthusiasm of the local population, the special feature is that many different activities are all available at the same time. So we can go whizzing down the slopes on short skis in the spring snows, and then take an enjoyable swim or just lie in the sun on an alpine beach right around the corner. Or watch the genuine Lipizzanas in the age-old Spanish riding school, and then enjoy getting pampered by the latest medical spa techniques. The truly unique thing about the Tyrol is the immediate proximity of everything. In the shadows of magnificent churches and ancient customs, athletes will find comprehensive programs of summer activities, 4,000 kilometers of mountain bike paths, old smugglers' trails, and paragliding schools invite you to enjoy an adventure in the natural countryside. Anyone interested in culture can visit castles and palaces festooned with a vast array of art treasures. The most wonderful thing about summer in the Tyrol, however, is strolling across the untouched yet safe alpine countryside. And a supplement, a sizable festival program such as the Tyrolean Festival in Earl. Or how does this sound? Conquering one of the 50 whitewater rivers by day and enjoying a Baroque opera in the evening, followed by a gourmet dinner. The Tyrol also specializes in entertaining families with children. Here, the youngsters have a wonderful time in the natural surroundings, while their parents get some relaxation. Hiking in the Tyrol, especially in the autumn, means far more than just getting from one place to another. It's a civilized change of living environments, between the town and the mountains, for example, or between the world of international sports events, such as the Generali Open in Kitzbühel, and the avant-garde music at the Klangsporen in Schwaz, or the change from technological nostalgia to pure harmony with nature. or the change from authentic folk culture in the Court Museum in Kramsach to global communication at international conventions in Innsbruck or Alpbach. The more roles you play in life, the more interesting it is. And the more levels the stage has to accommodate all these roles, the happier you will feel in a region. Paul, for example, is a student at Innsbruck University. In the afternoon, on nice days, he goes climbing for a couple of hours with his girlfriend up in the Nordkette range. Or Heine. He works in the Badenbach light planning office, developing new lighting systems for Medina in Saudi Arabia. After work, he hops on his bike and rides to the next village to perfect his skill on the tuba. Because he plays in the brass band at the Innsbruck Promenade concerts. Monica is a dental assistant and a member of a folk dance group. One of her colleagues is Sabine. She and her boyfriend take part in dance competitions. Meanwhile, the two of them have already won 2 European championships. The Tyroleans know how to take full advantage of their region, which is what makes it so attractive to other people. It's full of individuals who know how to live, and thus full of options for everyone to find happiness.